Welcome to Farming Aid. When it comes to raising cattle, few debates are as heated as grass-fed versus grain-finished. On the surface, it might seem like a simple difference in diet, but in reality, it's a question that shapes everything from the flavor of the beef on your plate to the profits that land in a farmer's pocket. Grass-fed beef is often praised for being more natural, healthier, and environmentally friendly, while grain-finished cattle dominate the mainstream market with faster growth, more consistent meat quality, and that rich marbling so many consumers love. But behind the marketing labels and the glossy packaging at the store lies a much bigger story. For farmers and ranchers, the real issue isn't just about taste or health, it's about money. Which system actually brings in more profit when you factor in land costs, feed expenses, growth rates, and market demand? In this video, we're diving deep into the economics, the challenges, and the opportunities behind both grass-fed and grain-finished cattle to find out which system truly delivers more for producers and investors. Grass-fed cattle represent the oldest and most traditional way of raising livestock. Before industrial farming and large feedlots, cattle were grazed entirely on pasture. This system aligns closely with the natural diet of ruminants, allowing them to eat grasses, legumes, and forbs while converting low-value forage into high-quality protein. In today's world, grass-fed beef has become a marketing advantage, with consumers associating it with natural, sustainable, and healthier food choices. Grass-fed beef often contains higher levels of omega-3 fatty acids, conjugated linoleic acid, CLA, and antioxidants, which nutrition-conscious buyers are willing to pay more for. Because of this, grass-fed beef can command a higher retail price per pound. In the U.S., for example, grass-fed ribeye steaks often sell for 20 to 40% more than grain-finished counterparts. But profitability on the farm side is not always as straightforward. Grass-fed cattle typically take longer to reach slaughter weight, sometimes 2 years or more, compared to grain-finished cattle that can be ready in 14 to 18 months. Longer finishing times mean higher overhead costs, increased exposure to disease, and more resources required per animal. On the other hand, grain-finished cattle dominate the global beef supply chain because of their efficiency and consistency. After spending part of their lives on pasture, most grain-finished cattle are moved into feedlots where they consume high-energy rations made up of corn, barley, sorghum, or other grains, along with protein supplements. This diet accelerates growth, increases fat deposition, and produces the marbling that consumers in markets like the US, Japan, and South Korea associate with tenderness and flavor. From a profitability perspective, grain finishing is appealing because it reduces time to market, increases carcass weights, and ensures a uniform product. Grain-finished cattle often achieve higher dressing percentages and carcass grades, which translate into premium prices at the processing stage. Moreover, the large-scale feedlot system allows economies of scale that grass-fed operations usually cannot match. The downside, however, is the high cost of grains and supplements, which can fluctuate based on global markets. A farmer's profit margin in grain finishing depends heavily on feed prices, which can eat away at returns when corn or soy costs spike. When comparing profitability between the two systems, the first factor to consider is input cost. Grass-fed cattle require access to large areas of pasture. If a rancher already owns extensive grazing land, this system can be cost-effective, as the primary feed, grass, is essentially free apart from fencing, water systems, and land maintenance. However, in areas where land is expensive or overgrazed, the cost of maintaining enough quality pasture to finish cattle can be prohibitive. Grain finishing, by contrast, requires less land since cattle are concentrated in feedlots, but it demands steady investment in purchased feed. For small-scale farmers with limited acreage, buying grain and finishing a smaller herd may actually be more profitable than trying to sustain a grass-fed operation. The second factor is time. Grass-fed cattle take significantly longer to finish. A steer raised solely on pasture may take 24 to 30 months to reach market weight, while a grain-finished steer can reach the same target in as little as 14 to 18 months. This difference of nearly a year has huge financial implications. Every additional month an animal is on the farm, it requires labor, veterinary care, mineral supplements, and basic management. The longer timeframe also means farmers tie up their capital in slower-turning livestock assets. Grain finishing, with its faster turnover, allows ranchers to cycle more cattle through their operation annually, increasing cash flow and overall profits despite higher feed costs. Another major consideration is carcass quality. Consumers around the world have different preferences, but marbling, intramuscular fat, is a major driver of beef prices in many premium markets. Grain finishing consistently produces higher marbling scores, which means grain-fed beef can achieve higher grades like USDA Choice and Prime. These grades often sell for much more than grass-fed equivalents, even if the retail marketing of grass-fed beef emphasizes health or environmental benefits. This creates a paradox. While consumers say they value grass-fed beef for health reasons, large segments of the beef buying population are still drawn to the taste, tenderness, and eating experience of grain-finished beef, often making it the more profitable option on a large scale. However, niche markets for grass-fed beef are expanding. Health-conscious consumers in North America, Europe, and parts of Asia are increasingly willing to pay premiums for beef labeled as grass-fed, organic, hormone-free, or regenerative. This opens up an opportunity for ranchers who can carve out a brand identity and reach buyers directly, whether through farmers markets, subscription meat boxes, or specialty grocery chains. In these markets, the higher price per pound can compensate for the slower growth rates, making grass-fed systems profitable if marketed strategically. But the challenge lies in scale. While the premium exists, it cannot match the global demand and scalability of grain finishing, which remains the backbone of the beef supply. From a sustainability standpoint, grass-fed systems often receive more praise, but they are not without challenges. Cattle on pasture can sequester carbon in healthy soils and reduce reliance on fossil fuel-intensive grain production, which is a selling point for eco-conscious consumers. Yet grass finishing requires more land and often produces more methane emissions per pound of beef due to the longer finishing time. Grain finishing, though criticized for concentrated feedlots and higher input reliance, is more efficient in terms of beef output per acre and per unit of feed energy. For farmers deciding between the two, sustainability is not just a moral or environmental question but also a financial one, as consumers increasingly reward environmentally friendly products with higher premiums. The trick is determining whether the market premium outweighs the additional costs. Regional factors also influence profitability. In countries like Brazil or Australia, where vast areas of grazing land are available at relatively low cost, grass-fed cattle operations can thrive and dominate exports. In contrast, in places like the U.S. Midwest, where grain is abundant and infrastructure for feedlots is already established, grain finishing often provides higher returns. Profitability, therefore, is not determined solely by the production system but by the intersection of land availability, feed costs, infrastructure, and consumer demand in a given region. Direct marketing has become a game changer for grass-fed producers. Farmers who sell directly to consumers rather than through processors or wholesalers capture more of the retail dollar. For example, selling a grass-fed beef steer directly to consumers as packaged cuts can generate nearly double the revenue compared to selling the same animal at a conventional auction. This is why many smaller grass-fed operations focus on building customer loyalty and brand recognition. Grain-finished beef, however, fits seamlessly into the existing industrial supply chain, making it easier to scale but harder for small producers to differentiate themselves without competing on volume. Another element to consider is risk management. Grain finishing carries the risk of volatile grain prices. If the cost of corn suddenly spikes, feedlot operators' profit margins shrink rapidly. Grass-fed operations are more insulated from feed costs, but they face different risks such as droughts, poor forage quality, or land degradation. Each system has vulnerabilities, and profitability often comes down to how well a farmer manages these risks and adapts to market conditions. Consumer education also plays a role. Many people assume grass-fed beef is universally better, but in blind taste tests, a large percentage of consumers still prefer the tenderness and flavor of grain-finished beef. This means grass-fed producers need to work harder to explain the benefits of their product and justify the higher price. Without strong storytelling and marketing, the premium disappears, making grass-fed cattle less profitable despite the higher costs of production. Grain finishing does not require the same level of explanation because its product already aligns with mainstream taste preferences and market structures. So, which system is truly more profitable? The answer is not one size fits all. For large-scale, commodity beef production, grain finishing remains the dominant and often more profitable model due to faster turnover, higher carcass weights, and consistent consumer demand for marbled beef. For small-scale or niche farmers, grass-fed cattle can be highly profitable if marketed correctly, especially in regions where land is abundant and consumer demand for health-conscious, eco-friendly products is strong. In other words, profitability depends not just on feed but on strategy, market positioning, and adaptability. As we look to the future, hybrid systems may offer the best of both worlds. Some ranchers are experimenting with cattle that are grass-fed for most of their lives but finished on grains for a shorter period to boost marbling and tenderness. Others are integrating regenerative grazing techniques with targeted supplementation to optimize both sustainability and profitability. The lines between grass-fed and grain-finished are becoming increasingly blurred, and the most profitable systems may be those that adapt flexibly to changing consumer preferences and resource constraints. At the end of the day, the debate between grass-fed and grain-finished cattle isn't about which one is universally better, but which one makes the most sense for the farmer, the land, and the market they serve. Grass-fed operations can shine in niche markets where health and sustainability are priorities, while grain-finished systems remain the backbone of large-scale beef production thanks to their efficiency and consistency. Profitability depends on strategy, resources, and the ability to connect with the right buyers. Some producers are even blending the two approaches to capture the best of both worlds. What's clear is that both systems have a future, but the real winners will be the farmers who know how to align their production with demand. If you found this breakdown helpful, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you prefer grass-fed or grain-finished beef, and why? I'd love to hear your perspective. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.